What's up, students? I wish I could see your faces right now. I mean, one of the best days of the year is this weekend, and I'm really missing being able to celebrate with all you guys. What day is that, you ask? Well, it's Easter. Now, I know it's not Easter Sunday, but just yet, but happy Easter. And I'm not the only one that wants to tell you happy Easter. Be sure to check back here a little bit later today to see some familiar faces. I don't know how to talk right now, apparently. But no matter how you grew up celebrating, or if you grew up celebrating Easter, you'd probably agree that for the most part, Easter is a happy and joyful time. I mean, think about it. You're allowed to eat an unreal amount of candy. And there's nothing better. You can try to prove me wrong. There's nothing better than a Reese's egg. Should have put those on the pizza rolls in Jeremy's kitchen on a Friday if you saw that. That would have been even better. Also, people wear pastel colors, and for some reason it makes us smile. We color eggs, which is weird. And parents force their kids to take photos with an oversized rabbit, likely permanently traumatizing them, all for an Instagram post. See, happy time, right? But for Easter, Easter is such a big deal, particularly for people who are Jesus followers. And if you're like me growing up, you may have wondered why Easter is even a thing, which is something we'll get into today. But before we get there, let's talk about that last thing for a second. Let's talk about the Easter bunny. Okay. Does the idea of a huge bunny sound like a strange tradition for this holiday to anyone else, or is it just me? So to prove my point, I want you to check out these pictures. First one, the girl is crying, doesn't want to be by you. What'll make the situation better? That's it. Grab her as she's trying to get away. Boundaries, bunny, boundaries. Now this bunny literally just escaped from prison, traded his jumpsuit for a costume and face paint. You're not fooling anyone, but this dude just looks sketchy. Now this one, I don't even know what to say. Who thought this was an acceptable Easter bunny? It looks like he just got jumped in an alley, woke up in a dumpster, and came into the mall. It's hideous. Okay, if there was an Easter bunny in Whoville, this is it. It even looks sinister, like the Grinch dressed up like the Easter bunny to steal Easter. Now this one's from 1948, apparently when the Easter bunnies were getting Botox and eyelash extensions. I mean, those lips are ridiculous. Oh, last one here. Okay, this dude. He's the type that floats balloons outside rabbit holes, trying to get kids to come inside so he can eat them. Would not surprise me at all if the next It movie was a collab with this guy, right? Okay, now I have to admit, those pictures are hilarious and terrifying at the same time. I mean, Easter is mostly a fun holiday, but for those kids, I'm not so sure it was all that happy. Even though your family is probably not going to make you dress up and sit with a giant Easter bunny, at least I hope so. I think we all know that the feeling of being scared, right? We all know that fear can take away our happiness almost faster than anything else. We've felt some form of fear since we were little kids, like a monster in the closet or under the bed. Then as you got older, fears likely just transferred to other things like failing classes or being rejected by friends. And sure, your fear looked different than when you were a little kid, but the feeling was very real, right? And now you're in middle and high school, and you've probably figured out that you don't just grow out of fear. No, as you grow up, fear just actually grows with you. Maybe you don't even call it fear. Maybe you call it stress or feeling anxious or being worried, but no matter what you call it, you probably fear something. We all do, especially during a global pandemic. Whatever your particular fear is, you don't need me to tell you that it's a very real thing to you. The reality is that fear is on the rise. In fact, chances are good that in whatever room you're in right now, fear is determining the direction of a lot of our lives. We're making decisions to do or not do certain things based on fear. Whether we realize it or not, fear is fueling a lot of our thoughts and actions. And here's what's really interesting about this. If we were to just boil it down, there's one fear that kind of connects all of our fears, and it's this. It's the fear of death. Now you may be thinking, wow, this just took a dark turn. I'm afraid getting a bad grade, and I'm afraid of getting a bad grade in history. Not sure what that has to do with dying, but this is not just about physical death. It's about the end of something. For example, think about it in relationship to some of the fears you have right now. We're afraid of really truly being ourselves, because if people knew the real us, they'd freak out, they'd run for their lives, and their friendship with us would end. Their interest in being our friend would be over. We're afraid of, maybe you're afraid of not going into the college of your dreams. Because if our application gets rejected, man, that dream is dead. Maybe we're afraid of getting busted or found out when it comes to some secretive stuff in our lives, because that would mean other people's perfect image of us would have to die. Whether it's physical death or just the death of something we hope for, the fear of death comes down to losing something we think we'll never get back. When you think of it that way, it's easy to connect almost all of our fears back to a fear of death. See, death seems final, right? It's like fear's knockout punch that gives it victory. So if our fears come true and our friendship ends, that goal isn't reached, or the dream dies, and then we get to the end of our lives and realize that death defeats us once and for all, man, that's just flat out devastating, right? There's no hope in that. There's nothing happy about that. But that's exactly where Easter comes in, right in the middle of our fear of death. As we're in this Easter season, you may have heard that the point of this whole holiday isn't actually eggs or bunnies or chocolate. For those of us who follow Jesus, this is the time of year that we celebrate how he came to earth. He died on the cross as a criminal, and then on the third day, when nobody expected it, he rose from the dead. And that's what the big deal about Easter is. It changed everything. And it especially changed the life of a guy named Paul. Now, we've talked about Paul many times, but Paul is one of the most famous Christians in history. I mean, before he became a Jesus follower, he spent years trying to scare Christians into leaving the faith, using death as the ultimate threat. He was killing Christians. But then he met Jesus, like the used to be dead but not dead anymore Jesus, and it changed everything. Paul's life was constantly in danger throughout his entire life. You can read through his journeys. In fact, he was eventually killed for his faith. And despite all that, Paul seemed to live without fear of death. And in Paul's letters, we can see why. Paul writes a letter to a church in the ancient city of Corinth. And he reminds people that Jesus died and came back to life on the third day. Then listen to what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, 54 and 55. He says this, "Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" It's like Paul is taunting the very idea of death by reminding this church of Corinthian people that on Easter, death lost to Jesus. When Jesus died and he rose again, he defeated death. And that means that because of the resurrection, death can no longer defeat us. The power that death has over our relationships, our reputations, our future hopes, whatever that may be, our future dreams, and even our physical bodies is gone. Thanks to what Jesus did on Easter. We no longer have to fear any kind of death because Jesus destroyed death once and for all. See, after Jesus hung on a cross and was placed in a tomb, it seemed like humanity's greatest fear had come true. Death was the ultimate thing to fear. To Jesus' closest followers, it seemed like his death was final. The dream was over, but then Jesus walked out of the tomb alive. When he did that, it proved that even the power of death wasn't strong enough to overcome the power of Jesus. This is why Paul was able to live the way he did, no longer fearing death. And it's why he didn't seem to fear much of anything in his life after he encountered Jesus. He seemed to realize that even the scariest things that he went through aren't the most powerful things. The things we fear don't have the same power that Jesus does. See, Paul trusted that the fears he faced were no match for the power of the resurrected Jesus. In other words, Easter means fear isn't final. See, if Jesus can defeat death, he can defeat things you're afraid of too. Fear will try to convince you that it gets the final word, that at the end of the day, it will win. Fear will try to convince you that you're not good enough, that you'll really never find a purpose in this life, or that your life isn't even worth it. Fear will try to make you listen and obey it. That's what power is all about, listen and obedience. But here's the truth. Fear is only as powerful if it can convince you that it's final. Fear will try to make you believe that nothing is stronger than what you're afraid of. But when Jesus defeated death itself, he showed us that nothing we fear is bigger than him. Nothing we fear is stronger than him. He showed us that fear, no matter what we're afraid of, man, it doesn't get the final say. Now you may be thinking, you can't just tell me that because Jesus rose again, I don't have to be afraid of anything, even death. I'm still anxious. I'm still struggling with depression or terrified of what's ahead in life. Look, I understand. Even if fear doesn't get the final word, that doesn't mean we still aren't afraid of things, real things, big things. And it's not a guarantee that something you're afraid of won't happen. But it does mean that you're more equipped to handle those things than you may realize. Paul says this in Romans 8, verse 11, another book that he wrote. He said this, chapter 8, verse 11, "The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you." Stop and think about this for a second. Paul is saying that the same power that defeated death 2,000 years ago when Jesus rose from the dead, it's actually inside of people who believe in Jesus today. Maybe that's why Paul seemed to live free from so many of the fears that we typically face. And if you and I could embrace the significance of Easter in our lives, maybe we could too. When you have faith in Jesus, the power that brought Jesus back to life is inside of you as well. That means that fear doesn't get to tell you what to do. You may have woke up today completely controlled by all sorts of different fears. Just know that if Jesus defeated death, the Spirit of Jesus who defeated death can live in you. Imagine what his Spirit can do in the face of things you're afraid of. So let me ask you this. Where has fear been holding you back? Is it in a relationship, maybe dreaming big about your future, dealing with something concerning about your mental health that you're afraid to really acknowledge? Maybe it's doing something you know you should do no matter what it does to your reputation. Or maybe it means you're afraid of exploring faith in Jesus because up to this point you've been afraid of how your life might change. Wherever fear has been holding you back, with Jesus' help, you can take a step forward into facing that today. What steps should you take to prove fear doesn't have power over you? What should that be? Maybe it's forgiving someone, apologizing to someone, taking to your school, talking to your school counselor, seeing a doctor and starting a conversation, telling your parents something you've never told them, picking a new friend group that's better for you, or maybe asking the honest questions you have about Christianity. We're not afraid of those. See, this Easter, no matter what your step is, you can begin facing your fear because of Jesus, because of what we celebrate at Easter, what Jesus did for us. Fear doesn't get to determine the direction of our lives any longer. Look, I don't know what your step is, but I do know this. If you're someone who believes that Jesus defeated death and follows him, you have his power inside you. Because of that, you can handle whatever fear throws at you, no matter how scary it seems. Remember, you're not facing fear by yourself. You're relying on the power of the one who defeated your greatest fear once and for all. He took away its power, he took away its victory, and he took away its sting. And that means that you don't have to worry about anything being more powerful than Jesus. This is the hope of the Christian faith. This is what it's all built on. This is what caused Paul to live free from fear. This is what makes Easter such a happy holiday. While the rest of the world lives controlled by fear, driven by stress, you and I don't have to. We're free, and that's the reason we can say, Happy Easter. Look, I love you guys so much. I wish we could be together celebrating Jesus today. But on Sunday, make sure to head over to New Story Church, the Facebook page there, and join our live stream at 10:30, again, this Sunday, as we celebrate our death-defeating, fear-defeating, risen Jesus. I hope to see you there. Love you guys.